So as you may have heard, there was an interesting little military coup attempt in Bolivia. Let's just bring up a random Al Jazeera summary of what happened. So on Wednesday this week, which was the 26th of June 2024, there was a apparent military coup attempt in Bolivia where one military general, who was the head of the army at the time, Juan Zuniga, I think it is, like as the weird N, he led a bunch of military police to march on the presidential palace, demanding like a change of government. And then 5 or 6 hours later, after like protests in the streets, the troops ended up going back to their barracks after President Luis Arce swore in new military high command, and they ordered the troops back. And then they ended up arresting the coup leader, Juan Zuniga. And apparently what spurred this coup is that Zuniga went on television the day before this happened. And he said that if Evo Morales tried to run in the primaries for the presidency of the MAS party for next year's presidential elections, he would arrest him to prevent him from doing that, which obviously the military is not allowed to do. They're not a police force and allowed to just arrest politicians they don't like. So Arce, who is in a bit of a conflict with Morales for the presidential candidacy of their party next year, he heard that and he fired Zuniga from his position as the head of the army. And then the very next day, Zuniga, apparently still in control of some troops, ordered them to try to carry out a coup, which, as we now know, failed. And I made a video on this on my main channel. And Zuniga, after he was arrested a couple of hours after the coup failed, he claimed before the media that he did it because he was told by Luis Arce to do something because his polling numbers were getting bad. Now, I'm not very inclined to believe the word of a general who just tried to launch a failed coup and ended up embarrassed and arrested. It sounds like the sort of thing that one would say if they just launched a failed coup and were arrested and had to defend themselves after doing something that is clearly not at all defensible. So they would just make something up to sort of implicate the target of that coup and like cause problems for them because you've already lost. So I'm not exactly sure about, whether that's true or not. One thing that I did see, though, is that like everyone seems to be questioning what happened, or at least asking for some sort of like investigation. And now Evo Morales questioned the coup as well and asked for an investigation. He said it was suspicious that there was a lack of wounds, shooting, or any deaths. So first, what happened is some people who aligned with Evo Morales in the next year's primaries first accused Luis Arce and his vice president David Chocohanca of having basically done this as a false flag to up their polling numbers because they're afraid of losing next year's presidential primaries to Evo Morales. So this article is about the vice president of MAS, which is the party. He's not actually the vice president. He's not in any official political position, but he's the vice president of the party. And he accused those two of having organized the coup. Obviously, these are just accusations. There's no evidence of it apart from the fact that Zuniga said so and that the coup seemed kind of weird. And then Evo Morales came out. Very much later, he came out. During the coup, Evo Morales didn't say anything about this. He seemed genuinely concerned about it and was like calling people to protest in the streets, calling for the defense of democracy, blah, blah, blah. And so Evo Morales, he was a bit less straight up about just blaming his political opponents in the government for organizing the coup. Rather, he just expressed doubts about it and called for an investigation. I mean, you would hope there would be an investigation anyway, wouldn't you? And the general who instigated the coup specifically said that he was doing it to prevent Evo Morales from running. And to me, it seems like a kind of weird way to save Arce's polling numbers in a presidential primary within the same party as Evo Morales by running a coup whose main objective is to stop Evo Morales from running, because that's just going to cause more people to rally around him. So for me, it really doesn't, like the idea that this could be a false flag, doesn't really add up. It doesn't really make any sense because it just doesn't really seem like from a logical standpoint that it would benefit the party who supposedly carried it out. Though, I mean, anything is possible. It seems like a huge win for Evo Morales overall because not only did it show that he's still feared by the military and the right wing, they don't want him to get into power. But now all this talk about it potentially having been a false flag makes his opponent in the primary look worse. So he's the huge winner here, if anything. So if this was a false flag, it was possibly the worst false flag ever. But definitely either way, it was the worst coup ever. To me, I think the most likely situation was basically a temper tantrum by a military general who did something very obviously beyond his role and station, and rightfully got fired for it, and then threw like a hissy fit by ordering like a bunch of military troops to just occupy the capital with no plan whatsoever in the spur of the moment. It seemed pretty pathetic and sad. But who knows? It could also be like a bizarre mass party internal politics thing. So watch this space, I guess. We still have to wait and find out. The coup was basically supported by no one, you know? It had no political allies. Every single person, even like fucking Janine Áñez, ex-dictator, ex-right-wing dictator, denounced the coup on Twitter. Though they might be doing that because the false flag hypothesis is good for them. I don't know. But either way, it was obvious that it wasn't. It seems pretty obvious that it was now, in retrospect, now that we have put all the facts together, that it was not going to work, that they had no real plan, but very weird indeed overall. Still more real than January 6th? Yeah, that much is true. For sure. Still a lot to be figured out with what happened. I think the people who were saying it was a false flag aren't going to change their mind no matter what. So even if there is like a real good investigation into it, I seriously doubt that a finding of it was just an insane general would change anyone's mind about that. I guess we'll see what happens with the primaries next year for the presidential nomination from us. It's weird as well because Evo Morales should be allowed to run in the next election legally, because the Bolivian constitutional term limit is only for consecutive terms, not for non-consecutive terms. Yet the Constitutional Court, which I honestly believe was pushed towards this decision by Luis Arce and his government, they came to a finding that has no basis whatsoever in the Constitution, that Morales cannot run again because he's already served 2 terms, when he's not currently the president. And the Constitution only talks about consecutive terms. So that's something they just completely fucking made up. And I think it's really sad how easily it seems to get them to just say what the government at the moment wants, because that's clearly what happened there. By any sort of reasonable interpretation of the law, he should be able to run again. But yeah, that's my update on the Bolivia coup. I made a video on my main channel like the second that it happened, which very quickly became obsolete. So I wanted to make a follow-up now going over the developments since and things that are still developing. So we'll see what happens, I guess. Give it a little bit more time so that things can clear up, and probably... honestly, I seriously doubt we will ever know for sure what the fuck really happened. But my hypothesis is that it was just a general throwing the equivalent of an incredibly dangerous temper tantrum because he got fired. I think that's the most likely hypothesis here.